Hello, fellow servants of glorious hope. I look forward every week to sharing my thoughts and insights that I have chewed from the Word of God in the Bible. Normally, these thoughts and insights are products of my experience in my relationship with God as I ponder His words and my journey in my relationship with Him. When I was still new in my faith, I had the idea that if I come to Him, submit myself to Him, and do what He wants, then my life will be comfortable and I will get what I want. Unfortunately, the opposite happened to me. I came and received Jesus in my life in September 1996. In 1997, I lost my job because of the Asian financial crisis. As the company I worked closed, after some time, the financial crisis worsened, which affected Europe and the USA, further delaying any hope of recovery and a job. For more than 7 years, I was out of work, depending on allowance and dole-outs from families and friends. Yet, despite my predicament, I continued working in the ministry, handling my small group and the ministry we started during that time. We went from one drug rehabilitation to another almost every day, doing my duties as leader of a small group every Friday and doing support group, which is the ministry that we started every Saturday. All these things I did without complaint because I believe that by pleasing God, He will reciprocate by making me happy and contented. My view then of happiness and contentment is reconciling with my spouse and recovering from my financial losses due to bad business decision I had in the past. During that time, those thoughts were my motivation. However, later in life I realized how wrong I was. The financial crisis and loss of my job did not bother me at all because I was hoping for a higher reward of recovering my reputation from a bad business loss and redeeming myself from the rejection of a loved one. Both incidents were important to me because they feed my need for approval from my family, peers, and the society I wanted to impress. I hung on to that hope for some time only to be proven wrong later in my journey with God. It all started when I read a passage in the Bible about what God said to Ananias about Paul. When he called him, that started my doubts on what I was holding to. It said, "But the Lord said to him, Go, for he is a chosen vessel of mine, to bear my name before Gentiles, kings, and the children of Israel. For I will show him how many times he must suffer for my name's sake." Yet despite the trials and the sufferings that Paul endured, he still managed to accomplish his mission and was the pillar of the church that started after the death of Jesus Christ. He has done so much for the church during those days. Yet, how come God said those words to Ananias? I thought that all the while, the financial crisis and loss of my job were the sufferings that I must go through. I was greatly mistaken. Although there are difficulties that I went through and endured, I realized that the suffering that I must go through is much deeper than I expected. They're the things I long for to satisfy my need for approval that were anchored on the reputation that I was trying to build from the success that I'll get when I become successful in my business and recognized by my family's peers and society. I also thought that reconciling with my wife means changing her view of me rather than the rejection I felt when she went out with another man. Looking back, I did not realize all this at once. Rather, they are products of various trials, sufferings, and pain that I must go through in my journey. I realized that my mood and character were all tied up to expectation that I have built in my head to achieve whatever outcome I made up. It affected the people in my family and the people I was working it within the ministry, and later, that mood and character that existed long time ago also affected my relationship with my co-workers. My character is the product of the attitudes and habits that I've developed all these years. My attitude was the result of my upbringing, social influence, and experience in life, while habits are regularly repeated behavior that I developed through years in how I can satisfy my need for approval that later progressed without me really thinking at all. It developed through time because of reinforcement and repetition. In fact, one American psychologist, G. Stanley Hall, said that man is largely a creature of habit, and many of his activities are more or less automatic reflexes from the stimuli of his environment. We are truly creatures of habit and routine. Just as it takes us years and years to develop our personalities, we're also developing behaviors and habits that will stay with us for a lifetime. Many of which are not always healthy or helpful to us. The reason they're attached to us is that we always search for easy options when dealing with any emotional pain and sufferings. We're not used to difficulties, pains, and sufferings, especially nowadays. It is easier to embrace an action that will make us feel comfortable instead of one that disrupts our daily routine. In fact, based on her findings and research, psychiatrist Dr. Anna Lemke observed that the source of people's unhappiness is their relentless pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain. If we go back to the heart, attitudes and habits are developed and stored in our identity levels. To change the outcome of the heart is a different experience. However, even though we know in our head that some personalities, habits, attitudes, and character are not healthy or useful to us, we tend to hold on to them with many excuses, like maybe we're still a work in progress. What we are doing is not affecting other people, or we are born like this. Nothing can change us now. So on and so forth. Maybe because we do not like to go through the pain and discomfort of change. That's why part of the process we discuss in the exercise under discipline is how will it affect us emotionally if those change will happen. Some verses in the Bible, like that in the book of James, do not really appeal to us because they are countercultural. Count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything. We like quoting this verse. When we are going through pain and difficulties in life, but what is it that we should consider as joyful? Going through the trials? Actually, what James is trying to tell us or help us understand in this verse is the kind of character that trials will produce in us. That is what we should consider as joyful. It's not easy for us to change, which is why most often, because of the habits and attitudes that we are used to operating, we're forced to pause and reflect in order to change our pattern of response and the habits that we develop through the years. Trials and pain will force us to pause and reflect since we are creatures of habits and never see the connection between our habits and character. We are fearful of trying something different and afraid to go beyond our comfort zone. We need to do things differently and start by working on healthier habits and changing our belief system. That was what trials did to me. I paused and asked myself, why should my reputation be equated with material success or any position I gained? Why would the opinion of other people matter so much to me? Why will the redemption of my rejection matter so much to me as a person? Why can't I accept the rejection and grow emotionally mature through the process? My approval should not come from people or the performance that I accomplish in life, but from God alone. I realize that I've developed habitual thought patterns that are not healthy, and it affected my emotional well-being, causing me to suffer depression from time to time. As a result, I tried to remedy them with any form of substance or unhealthy activities that are sinful. I need to break my habitual thinking and have a different perspective. Trials and sufferings, discomfort and failures are tools used by God to force us to break those unhealthy habits that develop and change our attitude through the humbling experience brought about by these trials. As I went through my journey, the verse in one of the Psalms intrigued me so much that I tried to study what it says. For you, O God, have tested us. You have refined us as silver is refined. Some verses talk about refining gold. How come the author uses silver? And even in some verses, it always associates the trials and suffering that we're going through to the refining of silver until I stumble on a story related to this. The story goes that a person got curious about how silver is refined, and he offered to learn the process. He visited a silversmith and watched him at work. He watched the silversmith hold a piece of silver over the fire and let it heat up. The silversmith explained that in refining silver, you must hold the silver in the middle of the fire, where the flames were hottest to burn away all the impurities. The member then thought about God holding us, where the flames are hottest to burn away our impurities. He remembered that verse in Malachi where it says that he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. He asked the silversmith if it was true that he had to sit there in front of the fire and watch the process at all times. The silversmith answered that not only did he have to sit there holding the silver, but he had to keep his eyes on the silver the entire time it was tested in the fire. It would be destroyed if the silver was left a moment too long in the flames. You must leave it long enough to serve its purpose or to serve the purpose, but not too long as it will destroy it. The member was silent for a moment. Then I then asked the silversmith, "How long do you know when the silver is fully refined?" He smiled. "Oh, that's easy. When I see my image in it." The silversmith knows how long to keep the silver on the fire. He does not keep it over the fire too long or too short, but he knows when it's just right to purify it. God broke me so that He can start working on me and conform me according to His purpose to the image of our Lord Jesus Christ. While it is part of our universal nature to seek pleasure and avoid pain, my upbringing played a central role in how I dealt with suffering because it was an unwelcome interruption to my pursuit of happiness. Before I will normally Before I will normally reject suffering, I either withdraw and isolate myself while other people might fight it, repress it, medicate it, or search for quick fix solution to get rid of it. But understanding the story of the silversmith, everything changed. When we are over the heat, just remember that God has His eyes on us. He knows when we had enough and when we are refined and purified. His timing will always be just right. When we are feeling the heat of the fire, remember that God has His eyes on us and He will sit as a refiner and purifier, keeping watch until He sees His image in us. God is intimately aware of our need and limits. He also knows just when we had enough. At the right time, He will remove us from the fire. The results will be at the right time. In due season, we will bear we will bear the fruit of the Spirit when we are over the flames. We need to trust Him. The results will be for our good and His glory. Whose image is on you? Can the Lord and others see His image in your life? Thank you, everyone, and have a fruitful week ahead of you.